So good afternoon to all of you. So as the loading of the screen happens, let me give my introduction and just give a few starting tidbits. So it's a great privilege to be invited for this seminar and a lovely experience to be talking to all of you. Now, treasury as a topic, like Mr. Das has been saying, has been my passion for all of 25 years of my career. But the funny thing is I've always detested risk managers during all of this time, because they actually use every opportunity to come and tell me that I'm taking too much risk, or they will subtly remark that the probability of losses on the position that I'm taking at every point of time. So when Mr. Muralidharan actually suggested the topic of this discussion to be using treasury as a risk management tool for the balance sheet of a bank, I really thought, life has indeed come a full circle, because this agenda actually turns the topic around on its head. Instead of risk management controlling the risks that treasury takes, we are actually talking of, using treasury to control the risks of the balance sheet of a bank. So I really like this topic, and we got the exact kind of material to discuss this with you, which we hope will be really useful. And also I should thank the way Mr. Das gave me such a good introduction. And I should actually also thank Vasu, my colleague, for joining me as a speaker on this subject. So like you saw in the profile, between the two of us, we have nearly more than 50 years of experience in the market. And so on the topic of this particular asset liability management, I'm yet to find the person in the market who is better capable to talk about the subject than Vasu himself. So combined, we have a lot of experience. We really hope that we can add some value to this entire lecture. And I'm told that you are actually, all the audience here is actually passed the Certified Treasury Management Program, which actually means that you actually have some basic level of knowledge in treasury. So when we prepared the presentation, we actually assumed that the audience could be from diverse background. So we tried to make it a little simple and, not being very technical. So I am actually now probably apologizing if you find it to be too basic. Please pardon me for that, but we will try to make it at least a little interesting. So when we talk of managing risks in the balance sheet of a bank, the most significant risks that come to mind is asset liability management. Or the management of the liquidity risks in the balance sheet, which also combines the interest rate risk management of a bank. So it is important to understand that there are certain risks that are measured by accounting and hence easily recognized, but there are a lot of risks that are not recognized by accounting in 1 year, but are invisible and actually gradually get accounted or visible during the lifetime of a particular contracted asset or a liability. So we will be discussing some of these things over the next 45 minutes to an hour. So let me give you some very easy examples from real life that can happen in your personal life as well. My first example is, now suppose you have a fixed rate asset, like a fixed deposit that you have invested in. So this earns a fixed rate of return over a period of time. Your initial conclusion will be to say that there is absolutely no risk in holding this fixed deposit because it gives you a fixed return, known return, certain return. But suppose you have acquired that same return, same asset, using a liability, like say a personal loan or any other kind of a loan, which is actually floating, then suddenly the same turns risky, because the interest rate on your liability can actually go up or go down, but the returns are fixed. Hence, you are exposed to interest rate risk. So that is my first example. Second example is, suppose you have a floating rate asset. Now you can say that you have risk because the returns are floating, it can go up or go down. But suppose you have floating rate liabilities, then the earnings on both the floating rate asset and the floating rate liability can go up or down, which actually means that you are actually completely hedged and you don't really have too much of a risk. Now look at the third example, third possibility. Now suppose the floating rate on which your asset and liability are benchmarked are two different benchmarks, meaning that one benchmark can go up or down at a different speed than the other benchmark. Then again you come back to a risky scenario where your income can go up or your expenses can go up depending upon which benchmark goes up. This is called the basis risk. Fourth example I will give you is on the HTM. All of you will know very well about HTM. Now the common logic is when you buy bonds and put it in HTM, there is no risk because you don't need to recognize it. This is what I was mentioning in the beginning, that this is one classic example of where accountants do not recognize the risk, but the risks are very much there in the balance sheet because the bond is actually a fixed rate bond most probably, and you're earning a fixed rate of return, and it is exposed to interest rate risk very much as what your trading portfolio is. So there is risk in every aspect of your balance sheet. So in other, there is risk everywhere, and you need a proper method and mechanism to, account for all of this. So now, so this is the agenda slide that we have, put out. And when we really look at the risk of the balance sheet of a bank, we, like I said, not only need to recognize the risk pertaining to interest rate risk, like I mentioned above, but we need to look at one very important risk, which Soumya had, passingly mentioned at her introduction, which is the liquidity risk that every balance sheet faces. Now, asset liability management is a process undertaken by a bank that actually ensures that resources are raised and deployed in a manner that keeps various risks at an optimal level while maximizing profits at the same time. So this process actually entails, she actually alluded to that, what I was going to say, which actually identifies the various risks, it quantifies them, it ensures that they are adequately priced so that the profit is maximized given the determined risk level, and subsequently, to attempt to ensure that the disruptions from these risks are minimized. So the process of doing all this is what is called as the asset liability management, and there is a whole lot of effort which goes into this. Now, if you remember, you would have seen in Vasu's profile, transfer pricing as a very important thing. So transfer pricing is also used as a very important instrument for transmitting organizational strategy and policy to various departments and branches of the bank. It is a very powerful tool because you can actually make a particular strategy more attractive or less attractive by appropriately pricing the risk. And hence, the limited point I wanted to say is that the strategy of a bank, while you can talk about it as much as you want, but it is the asset liability management group which actually converts that risks or the strategy which are exposed in words into actual actionable executable plans by making some of them attractive and some of them unattractive, so that automatically the economics of agents takes over and ensures that the bank does not enter into activities which are less attractive as per the fund transfer pricing. Just a word on liquidity risk. Now, liquidity risk is the biggest risk that the bank would face in the short term. So even a temporary liquidity problem, could spiral out of control despite the bank being solvent. Now, this will necessitate decisions that sometimes sacrifices profitability in order to ensure survival. So hence, liquidity risk is something that can actually, hit a bank from either side. That is the risk management. The risk might not necessarily be of shortage of liquidity, but what Mr. Das alluded to can sometimes be of excess liquidity, and you can actually blame it to the other Das in the market, which is the RBI governor, for actually providing so much liquidity to all the banking system that there is so much risk in managing that. Now, so this is the broad introduction, and market risk actually affects banks in, a number of ways. And the way we try to, measure the market risk of a balance sheet of a bank is in terms of calculating the duration of the assets and liabilities. Since you people have actually passed the certified treasury program, you know what duration is. So duration of assets and liabilities, calculating it is most important. Modified duration of assets and liabilities is also important. Another very important thing for liquidity management is gap analysis. And then you have the modified duration gap. So all of these are some of the tools that we will be talking about very, very briefly. So that's the need for the balance sheet management. Vasu, can you move on to the next slide?
Mr. Prasanna, just one small clarification. Out of 192 participants, only 57 are treasury professionals. All others are normal bankers.
So how many people are treasury, sir?
57.
Okay, so then I think our basic assumption was right. They are actually coming from a diverse background.
It is from a diverse background.
But sir, one more thing. Others are including the MP alumni also. They are also having a lot of knowledge about treasury.
No, agreed. But they are not hardcore treasury professionals.
Yeah,
so
not for.
Mr. Mehrotra, you are actually scaring me now. They have hardcore knowledge of treasury. Okay.
No, sir, you are an expert, sir.
Okay.
You can deal with everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, sir. So, I'll just briefly give a couple of introduction slides before I, get into Vasu to talk the technicals of the ALM. So, so the reason we have put once upon a time is you all remember the pre-crisis time, and of course we all remember it with pre-Lehman and post-Lehman. But before Lehman happened, there was another crisis which struck the UK banking markets, and that was the Northern Rock crisis. And that, if you really, I don't want to go through it in detail, but is the basic, the basic definition of ALM risk and balance sheet management risk is what Northern Rock is all about. Because number one, they did a lot of aggressive growth into areas which were very specific and not very broad based, and they kind of grew so fast, much faster than the system. They relied a lot on institutional funding, which is not only through institutional borrowing but also through the securitized market, because most of their growth, like 90% of the assets, were on residential mortgage, and they were securitizing these assets. And there was too much of reliance on institutional funding. And also the third aspect was they were relying a lot on short-term borrowing versus long-term borrowing. So when the market froze started happening, which is when interbank counterparties started distrusting each other, what typically happened was that the funding gap or the funding tap, so to speak, kind of stopped for these guys, and they were not able to roll over their money. And that was the main reason why the liquidity, what started off as a liquidity crisis, then became a huge solvency crisis. And actually, because of the regulatory regime at that time, actually allowing some of these entities to even leverage 60 times their balance sheet, it really came back to roost quite badly. Vasu, if you can go on to the next slide. So Northern Rock had a unique business model in that securitization, like I mentioned, originate and distribute, was really a central part of the bank's overall business strategy. So while many banks securitize assets at the margin, the uniqueness of these guys was that securitization and reliance on short-term market funding, like I told you, was a central feature of the business model. It is very well known that when you borrow short and lend long, you make a good term spread. And so there is always an incentive for every entity like a bank or an NBFC to do its own version of the ALM gap, which is to borrow short and lend long, because they'll pay a lower interest rate by borrowing short, and they will pay a higher interest rate for borrowing long. Similarly, retail versus wholesale liabilities, there is always a tendency to say that I don't want to, set up systems to borrow retail liabilities because it has its own branch network, administrative cost, and so on and so forth. Whereas wholesale is very simple. You just increase the price of your CD rate or your wholesale FD rate by a few basis points, you will get a lot of money. So always a tendency on banks to, rely a lot on wholesale. So this is what, ended up hitting these guys pretty badly. And hence this bank was very, very exposed very highly to the low probability, high impact risk, which is what is described by this scenario of relying on short-term liquidity, assuming that the tap will always be available. Next slide, Vasu. So basically, this is the last slide before I actually give it over to Vasu to hand over. So basically, see, all the learnings from this particular case study are there on the slide for you to see. So what we will focus on today is we will try to focus on the management of the balance sheet aspects in answering a few important questions. There is need for a really systematic or a systemic approach, I should say, for beginning right from the top management. It is not really enough if the people at the execution level do it. People at the top management will have to do it. There has to be a lot of close scrutiny involving balance sheet structure and the near-term liquidity profile, both how you are funding it from institutional retail, what kind of growth are you allowing the balance sheet to do, what are you strategizing in terms of how you want the balance sheet to grow. That is one part of it. That is very important for the management of a bank to decide and hence execute appropriately. And the near-term liquidity profile, Vasu will explain to you how the short end, let's say the less than 3 month profile, the 3 month to 12 month profile becomes very important buckets for determining the appropriate interest rate profiling, liquidity profile of the balance sheet of the bank. And the last question is very, very important again, is you need to appropriately decide the interest rate profile of the balance sheet of the bank, because at any point of time, there will be, like I said, you will calculate the duration of the assets and liabilities. So the net balance sheet of the bank can be broken down like a bond, and then hence you can then put your view on it and say that my view is interest rates are going to go up. Then the risk which the balance carries is too much. I want to reduce. So what can I do to reduce that risk? So I think those are the things that we will cover in the balance sheet. So Vasu, I think you can, take forward from there, and I will probably come in as and when I feel, I want to contribute in any of the slides.
Thank you, Prasanna. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Vasu.
Yeah. I'll just take it forward in 2 sections. Broadly, I tried to cover how do we look at risk from a balance sheet perspective, both liquidity and interest rate perspective. As Prasanna mentioned, what we normally see most of the times is the in liquidity, the extreme short-term liquidity risk, when people see that there is a high maturities and we are unable to roll over. That's one common thing that most of us are aware of, and think of that as the primary liquidity risk. Similarly, in when people talk about interest rate risk, the trading risk is what comes to the mind, where we buy a 10-year GSEC and interest rates go up and we make the M2M loss, or which is to say that when I sell that position, we make a P&L loss. These are very intuitive and in a treasury context, and we see them as the primary ways to look at the liquidity and interest rate risk. However, there is a larger structural risk that get embedded into balance sheet based on how we plan the balance sheet and how we take various decisions during the period, how that gets embedded into the balance sheet and how that risk comes through is what we try to capture in the next two sections. Broadly, the key focus areas cover how do we look at the risk metrics, risk, and the various matrices for this interest rate risk and the liquidity risk. The next section in key decisions, we look at how do we look at when we take a particular decision, what are the choices that banks or financial institutions have, and how does it impact the liquidity characteristics, interest rate characteristics, as well as the contingent aspects of some of the decisions. So just to go to the when we say balance sheet management, as we said, there are two parts. One, structural liquidity risk. How do we define liquidity risk? Is to say that bank should be, or the financial entity should be in a position to meet the liquidity needs arising out of either maturities of liabilities or the funding commitments that we have given to any of our customer when he comes upon to draw the liquidity from us in the form of a loan or any other thing. We should be able to honor that commitment, and we should do these things not only in the normal when business as usual case, we should also be prepared to do this in a severe stress case also. So broadly, we need to think about having sufficient liquidity to meet the needs in the normal course as well as any contingent situation. Not just for the immediate term, but we should have the planning in such a way that we have reasonable confidence that we should be able to do these things over a medium term and over a long period of time. So that's the way the proper when we think of a balance sheet management, and as we grow, that is the way proper way to look at the liquidity risk. The second aspect of balance sheet when we look at balance sheet management is from the interest rate risk side. So here we need to ensure that through the as we create assets and liabilities, lot of times, I mean, end of the day, what the liability customers want from their interest rates may be very different from what the asset customers want. Inherently, banking is about maturity transformation. When we say maturity transformation, it's not necessarily the liquidity thing alone. When let's say a retail or a wholesale customer gives you 1 year funding, and any other mortgage customer comes and takes 20-year funding, at the end of 1 year, we are not just rolling over the liability alone. We are also giving an interest rate which is very different from what we have taken originally. So 1 year down the line, the interest rate regime can be very different from what when we have given a loan 1 year back based on the 1 year liability that I have taken. So the earnings that are likely to get impacted because of these changes in interest rates is the other significant risk that we need to manage when we think of balance sheet management or asset liability management. So we need to ensure that earnings, whatever broadly the spread that I thought that I would be earning when I'm doing the loan pricing or loan disbursement, we need to ensure that there is some sort of a stability in that earnings, not only in the near term, but over the medium term. That needs to be done through appropriate profiling of assets and liabilities. Broadly, when we look at these ALM risks or the balance sheet risk, I just wanted to bring out what are the key policies that the banks think of to put in place when they look at when they want to manage these risks. Most of the times, I mean, most banks would be aware of asset liability management policy, ALM policy, broadly covering the liquidity related risk measures, which both for rupee and lots of banks will have some sort of a foreign currency, and banks or entities which have overseas presence will have a much larger foreign currency aspect. Similarly, shorter term, medium term risk frameworks, not only in terms of gaps that we look at these risks, we also look at it in terms of some sort of a ratios, how are wholesale funds to total funds is one example. So ALM policy broadly will look at, or liquidity policy will broadly look at the limits on gaps and ratios. The second thing is that we need to ensure that bank survives even in a reasonable or an extreme stress situation. So we need to have a framework for assessing the liquidity under a stressed scenario, and we need to see whether the financial entity or the entity is in a position to generate the required liquidity through sale of assets or investments or additional funding sources. So that's stress testing framework and contingency plan. The third one is on what we call banking book. Broadly, banking book covers the entire balance sheet other than the trading portfolio, or that is mostly warehoused in the treasury. So all liabilities and all loan assets or HTM assets broadly come under this banking book. So the interest rate risk, the way we look at the interest rate risk on this banking book is one key aspect that we need to consider and put a policy on how do we manage this aspect. Most of the times we have a very detailed policies on how do we look at these treasury risk, which is the most banks will have something called investment policy, which covers the risks that are coming that are arising out of the investments that we hold in GSECs, corporate bonds, and through FX markets or various where portfolios are M2M, which is mark to market immediately. And the moment we take a position, by end of the day, by month end, we know how much is the profit or loss. And since that profit or loss has an immediate impact on the bank's profitability, there is an extreme high focus on them. And various controls and measures are put in place much more on that aspect. So this covers the banking, but however, banking book is also something very important from a ensuring medium-term stability in earnings, which is coming through the core balance sheet. Then a lot of times, I mean, you may have to use the markets to change your interest rate profile through derivatives, through hedging processes. For that, you need to have a hedge policy, or how do we define something as a hedge, and under what circumstances, or this thing, something fails. So there is something called a hedge policy that we need to put in place. Most of you would be familiar with this. How do we look at liquidity risk in the short term? Primarily, the gap reports are the main tool through which we bucket various assets and liabilities, predominantly in behavioral terms. I mean, if something is a contractual and doesn't change, you take the contractual maturity. But whichever where there may not be a contractual maturity defined, or the contractual maturity changes significantly depending upon what we have observed. So usually we need to take that behavioral pattern of assets and liabilities. Similarly, we need to think through in the normal course how does the LC's BG's book behave, and how much is the outflows that are likely to happen. So any contingent flows that are likely to happen. So we bucket various things, and we see the gaps that are coming primarily up to 90 days. When we say short term, in a banking parlance, short term, I mean, we can consider it as about 90 days, because a lot of the primary source of funding for banks is deposits. If there is some issue with anything with the system, or especially the name or a bank specific issue, 3 months is a long time for the bank to take care of itself. So when we say short-term liquidity risk, we need to think in terms of 90 days as the thing. One thing that happened post 2008 debacle, global financial crisis, is that Basel has come out with various broad risk measures which will take care of things in a wide variety of situations. For liquidity, they have come out with two ratios. One of them is the liquidity coverage ratio. Most of anyway, it is required for banking system from 2015 onwards, and even for NBFCs and HFC, RBI has given the guidelines and to be implemented from some time in the near future. So broadly, it tries to ensure that the financial entity is resilient to liquidity disruptions in the market, either through market phenomena or through any bank specific phenomena. It tries to ensure that the entity has sufficient liquidity or liquid assets to take care of a severe stress lasting for 30 days. It's a how much liquid assets you are maintaining to take care of stress in next 30 days. I'll just very broadly, I mean, there is not much of thing to cover in this high quality liquid assets. In India, predominant part of it is through SLR securities, which have the largest market in India and are also repoable with central bank on a daily basis. So that's constitute the significant part of the liquid assets. In addition, corporate bonds and CPCDs, CPs, not the CDs. CPs are the other source of high quality liquid assets. And on the liabilities, broadly depending upon the characteristic of the liability, the Basel defines the potential outflow factor. These are normative, means same for all the entities within the system. Unlike the gap report, where when we assume behavioral outflow, each bank will do its own analysis, its own study on how potential outflows are likely to be in savings or current account or cash credit type of things. But in LCR, they are normative in the sense, if it is a liability, whether it's a term deposit or a savings or a current account from an individual, the outflow factor is 5 or 10, depending upon the characteristic of the individual, whether we have a relationship and whether it is how much is insured and this thing. So similarly,
Vasu, in the interest of time, I have a feeling if you go to the balance sheet example and when the calculation happens, I think that can go down well. Otherwise, you might have to end up pushing forward those things. Have a look at it.
So I'll just very quickly this thing. So LCR, we need to be clear about what are LCR adverse liabilities, which attract a very high outflow factors, which are withdrawable deposits from financial entities, where if you take a deposit, practically it cannot be used for lending. Similarly, we need to be cognizant of when we give credit facilities or liquidity facilities, we need to be cognizant of how much is the LCR impact likely to be. Similarly, when we look at balance sheet structure and structural ratios, broadly, most of us would be aware of retail versus wholesale funds, loans, loan borrowings versus market-based funds. Market-based funds means CDs, borrowings that you are issuing in the market based on a price that is observed. This thing. Similarly, rate sensitive means wholesale funds in general are more rate sensitive. They negotiate. If somebody else gives 5 basis points higher, market moves to them. So these are structural. They are not, it's nothing to do with whether they are maturing in 1 month or 3 months. How much as a proportion of your liabilities or in relation to the assets that you have. These are proportions. So you measure the structural liquidity risk through this aspect. The Basel ratio defined for this is the NSFR. It's not yet become effective in India, but maybe another 6 months it would become effective. The way I had mentioned, very similar to what we do in the normal course. We need to make sure that we have sufficient liquidity under contingent scenarios. So we need to have a plan for or estimates on how much liquidity is required and what is the P&L impact on if there is a alternate scenarios that plan out than what we have thought. While doing all these things, we need to ensure that we track metrics, bank-specific metrics, as well as some systemic metrics to see whether scenario or conditions in the market are changing and are different from what we have planned. So at various points in time, whether it is systemic liquidity, whether it is becoming significantly adverse or significantly surplus, as Prasanna mentioned, the excess liquidity has become a risk factor currently. About 1.5 years or 2 years back, the system was in deficit and market was feeling a lot of pressure because there was about 2.5 lakh borrowing that was happening by the system from RBI. So these external factors, similarly, whether premature withdrawals are increasing or stable, are some of the metrics that banks or entities need to constantly monitor to see whether there are any market changes or perceptional changes which can come and impact us in the manner. Broadly, whatever I spoke covers the liquidity aspect. Now, on the banking book interest rate risk, the few measures that we need to think through is from an economic value perspective. When we say economic value, is that it's not likely to hit the balance sheet earnings in the current financial year. Any risk change in the expected earnings over a period of time due to changes in market interest rates or changes in deposit rates or changes in lending rates. How are they likely to impact the earnings over a period? And broadly, the PV of that aspect is what we call economic value perspective. Effectively, we look at all assets and liabilities like bonds. I have a long bond when I say I have an asset, and a liability will be considered as a short. Short means short position in bonds. So it's a portfolio of long bonds and short bonds, and we look at how's the net position that the bank is running and how is it likely to impact the economic value of the bank for changes in interest rates. The next measure is the earnings perspective, which is what most of us look at, which is the net interest income, changes to net interest income because of interest rate shifts. These are the two measures. We'll go a little more into details into of these measures. As we discussed, the economic value is measured through duration of equity. That is the measure that we use, or duration gap. RBI defines duration gap as the measure for economic value impact. The earnings impact is measured through repricing gap, EAR. The earnings at risk is measured through repricing gap. Repricing gap is very similar to liquidity gap. Instead of maturities, we take if it is a floating rate loan, we take the next repricing date rather than the maturity date. But otherwise, if something is fixed rate, the contractual maturity will be the repricing date. The repricing gap report, we prepare it in two different manners. One, just based on the next maturity date, which is the traditional repricing gap report. Another statement that is becoming more critical in the current environment, especially after RBI made sure that all retail and SME loans are linked to an external benchmark. We need to look at this repricing gap report per benchmark. For each of the benchmark, how is my balance sheet over the next some period is exposed to? And we need to see whether we take a uniform interest rate change or differential interest rate changes, because not all interest rates in the system move together, what we call basis risk, which means there is a differential movement of interest rates when some policy measure or something is announced, and that can impact the balance sheet differentially. So that comes through basis risk measure. So to go into these two little more details into how do we look at it through an example, we look at DOE. Because assets are long assets, we just take the amount of assets into the duration of assets, reduce the amount of liabilities into duration of liabilities, and net worth is the own funds, which is the equity of the bank or net worth of the bank. So we are getting the sensitivity. It is equivalent to saying that how is my net worth how much of sensitivity my net worth is exposed to for interest rate. If I were to look at my net worth as a residual bond position, what duration does it have, or what sensitivity does it have for interest rate changes? So it tries to estimate the duration of the net worth through the traditional methods that we have when we look at normal bonds. So just to give you an example, this is a very simple balance sheet where 12 rupees or 12 billion of net worth that we have, 78 billion of deposits, 78 billion of deposits and some borrowings. And we have taken some duration measures. We'll just go a little more into the this thing. So total, I have 100 billion of liabilities, and the duration of liabilities excluding the equity, that 88 billion, which is the weighted average multiplied by the amount, 1.33 into 78 plus 5 into 1.6 plus 5 into 0 by 88. The weighted average duration of the liability portfolio is 1.27. Similarly, on the assets, broadly, banks maintain SLR. In this case, we have taken at about 4.38 duration, which is 5-year maturity type of a thing. Corporate loans, significant part of the balance sheet will be corporate, loans. We have taken about 0.4. Basically, most of the loans will be floating rate linked to 1 year, 6 month NCLR and 1 year NCLR, where residual, if you look at it on an ongoing basis, it will be about 0.5 because some loans will be maturing in the next month, some will be in 2 months from now. Like that, you will have a long maturity profile, but predominantly up to 1 year. So the average maturity, average duration, we have considered about 0.4. Retail loans, a lot of retail loans will be floating, primarily the mortgage loans, whereas auto loans and CV, commercial vehicles, and PL, personal loans, they tend to be 3 to 7 years fixed, where duration tends to be a bit higher, where we have taken a little longer. So if you look at the entire thing as a portfolio of bonds, that I have 100 billion of bonds, assets at 1.32 duration, funded by 88 billion of liabilities at 1.27, how does my net worth look like? If you see the framework that is put for DOE, it will look as if the net worth will move like a 1.72 duration bond. So for every 1% move, adverse move in the market, 1.72% of my net worth can get eroded over a period of time, which will come through ER over a period of time. ER may be much smaller in this case. However, over the longer period, for every 1% adverse interest rate movement, 1.72% of my net worth will get lost. That's the way to look at this measure, to give you a little more details into how did we come to the balance sheet that we explained.
Please, can you please mute? Somebody is speaking. Let the speaker speak. Everybody else mute, please.
From where this figure you got it, 905 into 2300 of this Gopinath Singh.
Or whoever is speaking, if you stop, then only the speaker will speak.
Ms. Somya Yusuf, who is speaking, please make his mic mute.
Vasu, you unmute and start now. She has muted everybody.
Can you hear me now again?
Yeah. Continue, please.
So this is just a simple balance sheet, much more detailed than what is mentioned. MCLR linked, repo linked loans, home loans, auto loans. We have taken some example as a just to make sure everybody understands this thing. And we see that DOE is 1.72. This becomes a measure that we need to think through how do we manage this for different interest rate scenarios.
We'll do everything.
We'll come back to how do we look at managing that DOE. Now I just want to set the context in terms of how do we look at the risk. The next one is ER and basis risk. ER is something we are all familiar with, where we put all assets and liabilities based on the repricing characteristic and measure. The basis risk, as I mentioned, not all assets and liabilities on balance sheet are exposed to the same type of interest rate risk. They are all different and may move differentially from each other. So the basis risk comes or arises because of that. We tried to put a simple ER measure through a repricing gap, this thing. ER measure, we need to be bothered predominantly about the gaps that are up to 1 year. So everything beyond 1 year, we just clubbed it and put it into one number. The liabilities that we have considered broadly, we have put it in these buckets. So approximately around 5 billion of liabilities are coming in up to 1 month. For simplicity's sake, we have, 12.3 billion is coming up to 1 month, and we have just taken some profile for liabilities. Similarly, assets, we have considered a profile. So if you see the interest rate gap, the third one from the bottom, broadly, we have about 27.7 billion of net assets.
Sir, one doubt actually. Here, actually, for current accounts, how come duration is taken?
It is when we look at current accounts, we take the liquidity profile. We assume that so much of current account will go out based on our profile of assets and liability. From our behavioral profile of current account, we will estimate how much current account is volatile, and that volatile part, how is it likely to run off up to 1 year. And then core part, which we consider is placed for maturity beyond 1 year. When we say something is maturing, it is, I need to fund the balance sheet when some liability matures based on the prevailing interest rates. So the volatile portion of current account, and including savings also, based on the maturity profile for up to 1 year, comes in the earnings at risk measure statement.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And actually here we need to take any board approved policy for this kind of thing?
It depends on the governance framework in the respective banks. Most of the times the ALM policy, usually these things are part of ALM policy, gets approved at the board level, or ALCO if to start with. Banks can take it to the ALCO. Once it stabilizes and there is a wider acceptance, it can be taken to the board.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sir, one question. As you mentioned, the duration of the current account or saving, the volatile part is basis the behavioral study. But what about for the new banks which do not have that historical data? How will they do that? What is the volatile portion?
The way to look at it is, however we are looking at it for our liquidity planning. In the liquidity planning, based on some assumption, if we are
Vasu, you've been muted.
Sorry. I was saying that however we consider for liquidity risk management, the volatile parts of CASA, we need to take the same for this ER also. For liquidity, for in whatever manner, you would be considering some X amount as based on some assumption, based on a hunch. Maybe, I mean, on a conservative basis, you would be thinking that so much is likely to go out, or you are prepared for that much of an outflow. That we need to take here. For savings and current, broadly, what you want to consider for liquidity up to 1 year becomes the maturity profile for interest rate purposes also.
Sir, any regulatory application for this that 15% is still in vogue, or the 15%?
Yeah, wherever behavioral study is not there, 15 and 85 for current account and maybe 10 and 90 for savings is still there.
Thank you, sir.
So this is the traditional ER method. So we compute the gaps and how much is the residual tenor for 1 year impact, and we say 1% adverse impact, and how much is the ER impact we compute. In this case, 23 crores for a 1% thing. The same ER gap report we do for basis risk. Here we consider each of them in different characteristics. One benchmark is the deposit rate. Refinance is based on, most likely we would have done repo-linked refinance. Corporate bonds, liabilities issued, borrowings, long-term bonds issued is a corporate bond benchmark. Overnight borrowings, MIBOR. Similarly, on the loans, around 30 billion is linked to MCLR and 30 billion is linked to repo rate. Home loans, similarly. So we bucket these things a little more detailed based on benchmark wise. Now we see that how is the net gap looking for each benchmark. So deposits primarily only the liabilities, practically there are no assets, so all negative numbers. MCLR, how does the MCLR linked loans move in various buckets? GSEC, corporate bonds, MIBOR. So various benchmarks that we can think of or the balance sheet is exposed to, we put the net gap for each of the benchmarks. And then instead of taking a standard 1% risk adverse movement, now this change in rates that in the last column, we need to put through based on historical observations for periods. So we, in this case, for example, we have taken 75, 50, 50 this way. But this is based on the bank's analysis of how in a short period interest rates have moved for an event. Let's say maybe we can take 2013 as an example, and 2013 in a very short period, some market event happened and various markets have reacted differently. So we observe how the interest rates have moved, various types of interest rates have moved for that period, and can take that as a one scenario. Similarly, 3-4 scenarios we can take. So if you look at this measure for this interest rate changes, the impact is 138 million. So broadly, the earnings measure is likely to be a combination of the traditional ER and the basis risk thing, because it's not necessary that it will be only a parallel movement, and it's not necessary that all the things, will move as per what we have planned. So basis risk measure beyond a certain level is based on how we think interest rates are likely to move differentially over the next period. There is no one way of looking at it. So various scenarios that we have thought through in the past, which is, one is a parallel benchmark, parallel shift, when RBI tightens, how do, so we have taken some past history on when RBI significantly tightened the system, how did the interest rates move? Lot of times either Q4 or some, when deposit rates tighten without significant changes in the system, when credit deposit ratio becomes too high, the deposit rates are under much more pressure. So we take some scenario how the rates moved during that period. Similarly, when RBI eased the system in a substantial manner in a very short period, how did the market, I mean, how did various benchmarks move? So we have prepared interest rates for various scenarios, and we apply the ER measure equivalent, the basis risk measure for each of the scenario. Whichever is the highest, we see why it is happening and whether anything is likely to happen in that manner, and you can take a proactive stance, proactive measures to minimize what you think is the risk aspect coming through.
So Vasu, we might have to wind up in 5 minutes, huh?
Yeah, so very broadly, I mean, when we look at, I mean, just to mention, when we say planning for balance sheet, there is a lot of choices that we need to make when we say I want to fund with retail versus wholesale. The choice is that while wholesale funds are high liquidity risk, they are easy to mobilize, and a lot of times they are maybe a little lower cost. Second thing is that we need to put a lot of branch network to make sure that I have a core retail fund. So it comes down to what strategy do I have in terms of my branch network and in terms of my growth that I want to do in various aspects. So it's not necessary that I just decide that I want to grow and I will use retail deposits to grow because I want to minimize liquidity risk. That may not be, we may not be able to do that because getting the core retail funds in a short period may not be possible. So a lot of them comes down to a medium term plan. How do we want to the balance sheet to evolve? May not be in the very near term, but over a period of time, if I want to grow in a particular manner, what is the best type of liability profile that we need to think through? So various things that we need to look at it is the retail versus wholesale. But how does the cost impact, the operations cost come through in various scenarios? Another thing is that withdrawable deposits versus non-withdrawable deposits. RBI allowed issuance of non-withdrawable deposits some time back. However, you have to pay higher cost. While in the normal course, it's okay to take a withdrawable deposits, but in terms of stress, either interest rate tightening or bank specific thing, non-withdrawable deposits are of a lot of help. Similarly, when we want to issue infra bonds, infrastructure, affordable housing bonds on the liability side, while they tend to be fixed rate. So while I will get long-term funds, I will also be doing a fixed rate issuance. So I am taking whether that suits my interest rate view currently or not. It becomes the this thing. So similarly, various decisions that need to be considered when we think of a liability structure suited for planning the balance sheet. Similarly, not just the balance sheet liability structure, we need to marry the business strategy or the asset growth that we are planning with the liability structure that we are thinking. Ideally, over a medium term, in a short period, it's okay to grow faster than your core liabilities. But over a medium term, we need to make sure if we want the low liquidity risk, we need to ensure that core liabilities are also growing as much as the core or long-term assets are growing. Similarly, do we want to lend to high-rated corporates to improve the liquidity profile of the balance sheet is something that we need to think through. So the asset side planning for the liquidity, structural liquidity that we want to have needs to be thought through appropriately while doing a medium-term planning of the balance sheet. Very quickly, post the introduction of LCR, the cost that we are incurring for managing these liquid assets has increased. So banks have to give an adequate thought in terms of how do they want to manage this liquidity and how do you want to deploy in various asset classes to make sure the cost of liquidity is low while also ensuring that the liquidity characteristics are maintained. When we said that structural balance sheet interest rate risk, broadly, if you look at the thing, if you want to change the characteristics of the interest rate characteristics of the balance sheet, if you look at liabilities, end of the day, they are very slow. Deposit profile, if you want to change, if you want to offer competitive deposit rates in the medium term to long term than the shorter term. But the mobilization is a very slow process. So changing the structure of the balance sheet, interest rate structure of the balance sheet through liabilities, especially on the deposits, is very slow. You can have a limited success with issuance of the bonds if the view is that, interest rates are going to go up. But otherwise, it's a slow process. Similarly, asset reprofiling also is a very difficult choice. It's not that we can choose what type of interest rate characteristics that we want to put it on assets. And so broadly, it comes down to SLR as the main tool for changing the interest rate risk on the balance sheet because that's something that is much more liquid in the market and there is an ability to sell and buy at different points in time depending upon your view. The interest rate swaps is available, the instrument is available, but to a certain extent it's limited because of the liquidity that is there in the market is limited compared to GSEC markets. So that extent it has its own limitations. Just to come back to the example that we looked at earlier, where duration of equity we said is 1.72. If we think that, let's say, current environment, interest rates are low and are expected to go up substantially, then we need to see, can I change this number? So it's like a long bond right now with a 1.72 duration. Can I reduce this duration of my equity using something that I can change on the balance sheet to see whether I can change this profile of things. So when we think of higher interest rates, I want to do bond issuances, term borrowings instead of earlier 1 year duration. I want to issue infra bonds 7 years where duration will come to around 5.5, and there are some other borrowings. So instead of a regular shorter term borrowings in refinance terms or something, I would like to issue infra bonds which are longer duration. So it will increase the duration of liabilities. Similarly, the SLR securities that I have. So just to explain, in the earlier thing, we thought refinance will be 4 billion with a 0.75 duration. Post, if based on our view, I want to change it to bonds as the primary source of funding. with a duration of 5. So that changes the liability profile. Similarly, on the asset side, earlier we have short-term G-Secs and medium-term G-Secs, both this thing. But post the view, we are changing marginally the profile of
Mr. Konda, you are not audible.
Mr. Konda, you are not audible. Soumya?
No, I haven't muted anyone. I think there is some connectivity problem at Mr. Konda's side.
Okay. No, but he is appearing as muted. I don't know why. And a lot. So anyway, but I can't even ask you to change the slide.
I actually can see him as unmuted only, sir.
Acha, is it? I am seeing as muted. I'll telephone him. So I think what he was so far explaining to all of you is the way the balance sheet would have been before you had a view on interest rates. So that is why the 1.72 duration of equity. And then he remarked that there are 3 areas which you can use to dynamically change this duration of equity. And those were the way you buy bonds, whether it is long term or short term, interest rate derivatives, that is using swaps. And third was issuing long bonds in the balance sheet. So because it's a liability, the longer you borrow, that means the duration of the liability is going long, and hence the duration of equity will come lower. So the point that Vasu was trying to make is that once you arrive, so you had before your view, you had a duration of equity of 1.72, let's say, which basically means that for every 1 basis point fall in rates, the bank will make 1.72% of its equity as gains. And similarly, a lose if the interest rate goes up. So if your view is that interest rate is going to go up, then you don't want to have this number as a positive number. You want to have that number as a negative number. So you need to bring the 1.72 down into negative territory. And hence you have to do 3 things, which is you need to sell your long maturity bonds and buy short maturity bonds. You need to pay in interest rate derivative market, and which is basically a short position. And you need to issue long-term borrowing, like say 10-year borrowing or 7-year borrowing to increase the duration of your liability. If you do these 3 things which are in your control, I'm presuming that the rest of the banking book is not in your control. Like for example, car loans, housing loans, term loans to corporates are not really at your control, and you wouldn't, that's the core banking book. And that is the, you would want to satisfy the hunger of the economy if you really want to grow. So you would not want to touch that. These 3 things you can, touch to change the duration of equity from positive to negative. And thereby your view, which is, if the view was negative, you can turn around that view to say that now, because of these 3 actions, instead of a positive duration of equity, I go to a negative duration of equity, which means if your view turns out right, which is that interest rates actually go up, the bank as a whole, the economic value of the balance, the bank will actually benefit. So this is the broad story. I think with that, we will conclude this presentation. So first, Vasu took the liquidity management into account, how short-term liabilities are important, how long-term liabilities are important, and how wholesale liability, retail liabilities are more important than wholesale liabilities. Then he spoke about interest rate risk, to how to tackle the interest rate risk of the balance sheet of the bank, thereby ensuring that you can ensure that the economic value that the bank has at any point of time is in line with the interest rate view that you have. So with that, we conclude the presentation. I think